Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your stack of source material, your research notes, and all those lingering questions, and we turn them into pure actionable knowledge.
That's the plan.
And our mission today is all about the defense architecture of the Marvel Universe. We're not just talking about who the heroes are, but really why they exist and, where they fit into this huge, complex hierarchy of security.
Exactly. We're moving way beyond just a list of names. The goal here is to really establish a strategic hierarchy. We're talking global, governmental, and all the way out to cosmic defense, using your source materials as the blueprint.
So we're going to be contrasting the more formal disciplined agencies, S.H.I.E.L.D,
Yeah.
Star Force, with the messy ones.
The very messy ones, the improvised, often reluctant groups like the Guardians of the Galaxy or, the Defenders.
And once we've kind of built out that whole architectural map, we're going to test it, we're going to see where the cracks are.
Yeah.
And the deep dive today focuses on the elementals: Hellfire, Hydron, Magnum, and Zephyr. These are nigh-immortal beings whose return to Earth just triggers this politically charged, high-stakes conflict that completely bypassed the conventional heroes.
And that's the key. By analyzing this surprisingly complex history of the elementals, we're going all the way back to 3500 BC.
Wow.
Yeah. And we get to see exactly where the standard operating procedures just completely break down. And that forces a reliance on these non-traditional alliances. We're talking doctors, thieves, even exiled super mummies.
It sounds like a spectacular case study in strategic failure and, I guess, opportunistic heroism.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this huge stack of information. We're starting with the foundational security layer on Earth, then we'll jump out to cosmic, and then we're going to spend some serious time charting this multi-millennia play of four beings who just wanted to be gods. So where do we begin with Earth's defense?
I think we have to start with the clearest mandates. When you look at Earth's defense, you see this immediate split, right? You've got the visible, high-impact force on one side,
Right.
and the pervasive sort of covert intelligence structure on the other.
And the sources are great at laying out these two foundational groups. So on one hand, you have the global elite, the first responders, the team that shows up when it's clearly a Class 5 event or higher.
That has to be the Avengers. Their core identity is crystal clear. Earth's mightiest heroes. They are the planet's first line of defense against the absolute most powerful threats in the universe.
They really define the whole concept of a super team for the planet.
Totally. And crucially, their origin reinforces that whole mandate. They weren't formed by, a political agreement or some scheduled deployment.
No, it was a reaction.
It was a necessary, immediate reaction. They came together specifically to defeat Loki and his Chitauri army during that crisis in New York. That one initial existential threat just solidified their entire mission.
When annihilation is knocking at the door, the Avengers assemble.
Exactly. And their whole operational tempo reflects that. They deal with external threats, alien invasions, interdimensional incursions, villains on a god level.
And while the team has definitely evolved and faced internal turmoil and all that, that primary directive, save the whole planet from literal destruction, that's always constant. They're the global emergency beacon.
Right, but they can't save the world if they don't know a threat is even coming.
And that's where the other piece of the puzzle comes in, S.H.I.E.L.D.
S.H.I.E.L.D. The Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division. It offers such a fascinating contrast. They are not a rapid deployment force like the Avengers.
Not at all.
They're a transgovernmental intelligence agency. They're the structure that tries to anticipate the crises that the Avengers might have to solve later.
So S.H.I.E.L.D. is basically the espionage and security backbone. It's all about prevention, not just reaction.
Exactly. Their scope is specialized, protecting Earth from superhuman threats. And that can be anything advanced tech, supernatural stuff, extraterrestrial dangers.
So S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of like the filter, the early warning system.
Right. They're looking for the hidden problems, the clandestine cells, that piece of recovered alien tech, the weird magical anomaly. They try to find it before it scales up to an Avengers-level crisis.
The insight here, which the sources really highlight, is the difference in accountability. The Avengers, they're theoretically sanctioned, but they often operate outside the day-to-day government red tape. But S.H.I.E.L.D. is transgovernmental. What does that structural detail actually mean for how they operate?
Well, being transgovernmental is their greatest strength and honestly their greatest weakness.
How
It
so?
means they have to report to multiple national authorities. That strategic homeland part implies global jurisdiction, but that requires consent. It requires constant political maneuvering.
Ah, I see.
So unlike the Avengers, who were kind of supranational in an emergency, S.H.I.E.L.D is just constantly facing these inherent conflicts of interest and bureaucratic scrutiny. And this very structure is what we're going to see later completely paralyze a global response.
Because they can't just unilaterally drop an entire agency into a sovereign nation without some kind of political consequence.
Exactly. It's a mess. The Avengers save the day because they can. S.H.I.E.L.D is often bogged down trying to figure out if they should.
That makes perfect sense. So if we move past these, like, global security mandates, the defense structure gets way more diverse, right? It breaks down into these specialized teams.
It really does. It diversifies into teams driven by very specific demographic needs or even scientific philosophies.
We have to talk about the X-Men here. They bring in a whole concept of defense that's tied directly to evolution and really societal survival. Charles Xavier's team of merry mutants.
Right. And their mission is so deeply rooted in this idea of sociological defense. It's not about fighting Doctor Doom or Galactus, not primarily. It's about existential preservation in the face of just mass cultural hatred.
So their mission statement is twofold.
It is. It's focused on protecting and educating the next generation of mutants, Homo superior, while at the same time relentlessly pursuing this dream of harmony with a world that basically hates and fears them.
I think the key detail there is that dual function.
Hmm.
They're a school and a fighting force.
Yes.
So they're practicing defense passively through education and nurturing, as well as aggressively when they have to. Their mandate is intensely personal, born from this necessity of survival and philosophical belief, not some military directive.
And that contrast really highlights the internal debate that just constantly defines them. Are they a military unit or are they civil rights advocates? The defense they provide is super specialized, focused on threats to their own demographic.
Often internal threats too, right? Like mutant extremists or people who would weaponize mutation.
As much as external ones, yeah. Now, compare that specialized philosophical mission with one that's driven purely by accidental science.
The Fantastic Four, the first family.
Right. The Fantastic Four are a defense team by circumstance, not by design. At their core, they're scientists and explorers first. Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Susan Storm, Johnny Storm. They defend the world, but they were changed not by a war or a social movement, but by a disastrous scientific experiment.
That exposure to cosmic rays during that experimental spaceflight.
Exactly. And that origin immediately tells you they are fundamentally boundary pushers. They're inventors, and their defense role is just a consequence of their constant curiosity, of them pushing the known limits of reality.
So they often stumble into these existential threats just because they went looking for the edge of the map.
Pretty much. Their mandate is anchored by two things: the family unit, which dictates their cohesion, and that relentless pursuit of knowledge. They don't have S.H.I.E.L.D's oversight or the Avengers' planetary mandate. Their defense is often focused on the threats that come from cosmic exploration or some hyper-science they were messing with.
They close the dimensional holes they accidentally opened.
That's a good way to put it.
That distinction, the scale of the problem dictating the structure of the solution, that brings us way down to the local level. When the threat isn't cosmic, when it's just really, really bad crime, the structure changes again.
And now we enter the realm of the reluctant and the cynical, the city savers.
The defenders. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist.
Yeah, these characters are fantastic because they show how defense can be entirely localized and just profoundly personal. They're singular heroes, each one burdened with their own challenges, often trying to avoid any large-scale commitment.
And they only reluctantly realize they're stronger when they team up to save New York City.
And the stakes here are street level. We're talking organized crime, corruption, protecting their immediate community. They save the city, but they do it neighborhood by neighborhood.
Which is such a critical counterbalance to the global teams. I mean, if the Avengers are off in space, who's stopping the crime lord who bought off the city council?
The defenders. They fill that hyper-localized gap. They operate in the shadows that the brightly lit global heroes often miss.
And then there's the ultimate form of localized defense, one born purely out of moral rebellion.
The Runaways.
I love this one.
It's a perfect example of a defense mandate born entirely out of opposition and, frankly, trauma. They're just teenagers. Gertrude Yorks, Chase Stein, Alex Wilder, Nico Minoru, Carolina Dean, and Molly Hayes.
And their origin is that they discover their parents are supervillains, part of a group called the Pride.
Yes. And just think about that. You're asking how they fit into this cosmic defense architecture.
Yeah, a bunch of kids who literally ran away from home.
Precisely. Their action is a pure ethical revolt. They formed a superhero team in direct opposition to the people who raised them, whose influence was corrupting the entire local structure of power.
So their defense mandate is immediate. Stop their parents' evil, protect themselves, and protect anyone their parents might hurt. It's totally divorced from any government sanction or cosmic ray accident.
Exactly. It's driven by moral urgency and a twisted sense of family loyalty.
Okay, so to recap Earth, we have the global response with the Avengers, the intelligence backbone with S.H.I.E.L.D, the sociological defense of the X-Men, the accidental scientists of the FF.
The reluctant local guardians and the defenders, and the moral rebels, the runaways.
It's a total patchwork of mandates. And if we think that's complicated, now we have to zoom out to the entire galaxy.
Oh, the complications only increase when you start dealing with interstellar law.
So the question becomes, if Earth's defense is so fragmented, how is the galaxy, which is infinitely larger, managed? And here, the sources provide this stark, almost cartoonish contrast between disciplined military might and, well, pure, beautiful chaos.
That's a great way to describe it. On one side, you have the clear, state-sanctioned approach, the Kree military, and specifically Star Force.
Right. This is interstellar defense operating under a clear military mandate.
They're described as an elite special forces team, a decorated and devastating branch of the Kree military. That designation immediately tells you everything. Hierarchy, training, operational rigidity.
Their formation and mission are entirely focused on state policy. They were established by the Kree's supreme intelligence, and their primary directive is to wage war specifically with the Skrulls.
Their historical enemy.
Right, and to battle all threats to the Kree way of life. They are an instrument of state preservation and expansion.
And the roster reflects that discipline. You've got Jan Rog as the leader, Min Irva, Atlas, Bronchar, Korath, and critically Carol Danvers, who becomes Captain Marvel.
So they represent the model of organized, strategic, cosmic power. They're like the interstellar S.H.I.E.L.D, but with a much sharper militaristic edge.
And their discipline is their defining characteristic. Every action is calculated, every maneuver is intended to preserve the Kree Empire. This makes them highly effective in large-scale structured conflicts, but historically highly ineffective at adaptability or recognizing internal corruption. They're too rigid, too devoted to a chain of command that's defined by the supreme intelligence.
Okay, now let's do a complete 180. Hold that mental image of highly disciplined Kree soldiers and replace it with the Guardians of the Galaxy.
The ultimate counterpoint. These are intergalactic outlaws who, through just sheer repeated circumstance, become the unlikely saviors of the galaxy. Their whole identity is predicated on their former criminal status. Their defense mandate is completely accidental.
Their style is defined by chaos, and that is a massive understatement. Sources describe them as unconventional, typically without a plan, and bickering constantly.
I mean, they sound less like a cosmic defense force and more like a spacefaring family road trip that just constantly ends in property damage.
And this raises that critical question you, the listener, should be thinking about. Are they heroes, or are they just cosmic wrecking balls?
Well, the sources suggest their effectiveness, despite all the chaos, is built on a very simple, very Earth-like concept. Genuine, messy, interpersonal bonds.
They care deeply about one another, and because of that, they usually succeed. Legal consequences or planning be damned.
Their defense is improvisation-based. While Star Force operates under the explicit, calculated guidance of the Supreme Intelligence, the Guardians operate on pure, messy, emotional investment and totally reactionary strategy.
So what this tells us is that the defense of the galaxy relies just as much on a ragtag group of criminals who happen to like each other, which is a massive risk factor, as it does on the disciplined forces of a militarized empire.
And often, it's the chaotic team that ends up solving the problems the rigid military created in the first place.
It's a brilliant fractured system. And now that we've established this full spectrum, from S.H.I.E.L.D's careful structure to the Guardians' utter lack of it, we have to introduce the threat that proves the weaknesses in this entire multi-layered architecture.
The elementals.
A threat so ancient and so politically adept that it sidelines the entire conventional global response. Here's where we shift into the detailed history. These are not your average power-hungry supervillains.
No, the elementals are a different class of antagonists entirely, which is why we're doing this full narrative deep dive. Our sources describe them using terms like permanence and antiquity.
They're defined as extra-dimensional humanoids and described as virtually immortal.
Right, and their whole identity is predicated on this desire for godhood. Hellfire, Hydron, Magnum, and Zephyr, they act as gods, and they seek to rule as such.
Let's just solidify their command structure and their fundamental power set, because it ties directly into their whole concept of dominion. So Hellfire's leader controls fire.
And then you have Hydron, who controls water. Magnum is the master of earth. And Zephyr controls air and winds.
The four foundational elements.
And you have to ask, why is that so significant in a universe with, advanced Kree technology and cosmic beings?
I'm guessing because their power base is primal.
Exactly. It's the foundation of the physical world. This gives them an immediate, undeniable claim to rulership over any terrestrial body they inhabit. They want to be the physical, fundamental masters of the planet.
And their powers go beyond just simple elemental control, which is the key technical detail. They can also manipulate other energies, right? Like forming massive force fields and this is critical, opening dimensional portals.
And that ability to manipulate dimensions is how they traveled to Earth sometime before 3500 BC.
3,500 years before the Common Era. That antiquity is just essential context. They weren't born last week in some lab accident.
No, they arrived, they appeared as gods, and they successfully ruled a kingdom for a long, long time. This wasn't some temporary incursion, it was an established dominion.
And their downfall is what establishes the entire premise of all the later conflicts. They ruled this unnamed kingdom until they tried to extend their domain into what would later become Egypt.
And that drove them into conflict with the local rising powers. This ancient aggression forced a massive countermeasure. They couldn't be killed by conventional means or even by emerging heroes. Their elemental control was just too absolute.
So the only solution was esoteric.
Yeah.
Technology rooted in magic.
Which led to the creation of the Ruby Scarab. This artifact, crafted by a young warrior named Dan and a wizard named Garrett, was the key to their defeat and their banishment.
And the Scarab had a massive immediate function.
Yeah.
It acted as a sort of elemental vacuum cleaner.
That's a great way to put it. It sapped the elementals' powers and then banished them into an extra-dimensional prison. And this wasn't just a jail cell. The sources specify that the elementals later rebuilt that space into their palace of gods.
Which shows that even in exile, their aspirations for rulership and power remained absolute. Their capacity for planning is, infinite.
It is, and here is the core high-stakes detail about this artifact that sets up the whole modern conflict. The Scarab isn't just a banishing tool.
Right.
Our sources explicitly state that while it can drain their power, it can also, if handled incorrectly or claimed by them, increase their powers geometrically.
So it's a massive double-edged sword.
A huge one. So you have an ancient, nigh-immortal threat with godlike aspirations, whose prison key is also a catastrophic power amplifier. When they finally regained access to Earth, which they did through a dimensional aperture, their entire goal was the immediate and total retrieval of this critical dual-function artifact.
And that retrieval process, the complex chain of custody, and the geopolitical mess it created, that is exactly why the conventional defense system, the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D, failed to act.
This is where the story gets really complicated. The Elemental's return to Earth sets off this wildly complex chain of events in the modern era.
And it's a story that's less about raw power and more about, bureaucracy, theft, and some very surprising alliances.
Absolutely. When the Elementals got access back, they knew they had to secure the Scarab before it could be used against them. So their initial strategy relied on remote control, tapping into these pre-existing mystic connections on Earth.
So they immediately summoned the newly revived Encantu, the living mummy, and Zephyr mentally enslaves him, sending him to get the Ruby Scarab.
And Encantu finds its current holder, who was Amit Abdul. Now, for the listener, we should probably clarify this character. Abdul is also known as the Living Pharaoh, formerly the Living Monolith. He's got his own formidable powers.
Okay, so a major player.
A major player. And Encantu successfully overpowers Abdul and takes the artifact. But the plan immediately goes sideways.
How?
It's disrupted by low-level opportunism. A small-time criminal, Rich Harper, a thief known as the Asp, manages to steal the Scarab during the struggle between the mummy and the monolith.
So the Elemental's grand cosmic plan was foiled by a street crook.
Pretty much. And this forced the Elementals to escalate their involvement. Hellfire and the others dispatch Zephyr to Earth for direct intervention. She teams up with Encantu, and they track down the Asp, who by now has realized the power he's holding.
And Zephyr's strategy was just pure coercion, right?
Yeah, she holds the Asp's partner, Miles Zoldan, hostage. This forces the Asp to steal the scarab again, this time from its latest buyer, Dr. Alexei Scarab, an Egyptologist.
But Dr. Scarab turns out to be way more than just a historian.
Far more. The Egyptologist exposes the Elemental's world-conquering plot and, critically, convinces both Encantu and the Asp to join him in active opposition.
This is the moment the Unconventional Defense Force is born.
It is. This ad hoc alliance of resistance included Scarab students Janice Carr and Ron McAllister. So you've got an Egyptologist, his students, a newly motivated living mummy, and a small-time thief and his partner facing down 4 elemental gods.
Not exactly a conventional defense scenario.
Not at all. And internally, the elementals were already starting to crack under the pressure, which proves their claim to godhood was pretty fragile. When they captured Zephyr and Old Dan, Zephyr was condemned by Hellfire, Hydron, and Magnum as a failure and a traitor for her repeated failures.
So this reduces the elementals to a destructive trio, focused entirely on brute force and immediate tyrannical rule.
Exactly. And they then execute their world-conquering plan, but on a localized scale, focusing entirely on Cairo. They create an impenetrable force field around the city, demand immediate worship, and quickly establish a tyrannical government.
Now, sources are very clear that their military success was immediate and profound. It was a massive destabilizing force in a historically volatile region.
Oh, yeah. They crushed local Egyptian resistance, drove Israeli forces from the Suez Canal, and defeated Sudanese troops. This wasn't some quick skirmish. It was a regional geopolitical catastrophe engineered by elemental power.
And here it is. The single most fascinating point in all of this source material. This is the moment that completely invalidates the conventional defense hierarchy we just spent all that time establishing.
Mm-hmm.
United Nations forces and even the Avengers
Mm.
were mobilized against the elementals. They were ready. They were the correct tool for this Class 5 threat.
But, and this is the critical detail, they were not given authorization to act because of the politically tense Middle East situation.
You kidding me?
The elementals had shrewdly established their tyrannical base in a location that guaranteed maximum international gridlock.
So you're telling me that literal institutional paperwork and geopolitical squabbling stopped Earth's mightiest heroes from intervening against 4 elemental gods who are currently establishing a tyranny in Cairo. That's astonishing.
It is the core strategic insight the sources offer us. The Avengers are rendered useless by a bureaucratic stalemate. The threat was confirmed, the heroes were ready, but S.H.I.E.L.D's transgovernmental nature and the sensitivity of the region placed these unique crippling limits on global hero intervention.
The elementals were contained, not by power, but by paralysis.
Which meant the burden of saving the world fell entirely on Scarab's unconventional group. The doctor, the students, the thief, and the mummy.
The stakes were impossibly high, with Cairo serving as the elementals' new throne room.
Right, and their initial retaliation was minimal, but it was effective. Ron McAllister and a disguised Encantu managed to shoot Hydron.
And this shot, while not fatal, was significant enough to wing his chest and cause him to momentarily lose control of the elemental bonds holding their allies.
Zephyr aided their escape, which confirmed her betrayal to the trio. But the elementals quickly overpowered their fleeing foes and finally claimed the prize, the rupee scarab.
And just as that ancient history predicted, the scarab amplified their powers geometrically.
At this point, the 3 elementals, Hellfire, Hydron, and Magnum, are at their strongest. I seem unstoppable, and they're operating outside the reach of the mobilized Avengers. They've achieved that initial step toward unquestioned godhood.
But Dr. Scarab had a terrifying, brilliant last-ditch solution that relied on his specific knowledge of the scarab's energy.
He maintained a previously established link to the scarab, and he tapped its power and warped the entire city of Cairo into a dimensional aleph.
Okay, for the listener, what exactly is an aleph?
Think of it as a nexus of realities, a point where multiple dimensions meet, or in this case, a dimensional black hole that Scarab intentionally created.
The strategic brilliance was in the selectivity, right? He somehow managed to ensure that the global soldiers and uninvolved civilians were safely left on Earth.
Exactly. Only those directly involved in the conflict, the elementals and Scarab's team, were inside this newly created dimensional void. The geopolitical constraints were now totally nullified because the battle had been exported into a custom-built temporary reality.
Wow.
So Scarab, now operating at the center of this nexus, orchestrates the banishment. His team McAllister, Old Dan Carr, the Asp, they concentrate their mutual mental energies and channel them, along with the Scarab's power, through Encantu, Zephyr, and Scarab himself.
And that massive channeled energy blast expelled Hellfire, Hydron, and Magnum out of Cairo and into the vortex at the heart of the LF.
They were banished again. It demonstrates that while they may be immortal, they are not impervious to the Scarab's power when it's channeled by a focused will.
So Cairo immediately returns to Earth. The immediate threat is neutralized, but the core problem, the artifact itself, remains.
And this is where the opportunism comes back. The Asp, Zephyr, and Old Dan, focused on survival rather than global defense, immediately steal the Ruby Scarab and escape again.
So the artifact is still loose, and 3 of the elementals are simply exiled, not destroyed.
Exactly. The problem was temporarily solved by a group of non-traditional heroes, but the threat was just exported to the cosmos, setting the stage for one final confrontation.
And this one involves one of the universe's greatest defenders.
Right. The 3 exiled elementals, Hellfire, Hydron, and Magnum, they didn't float forever in the void. They were rescued and returned to Earth by the extraterrestrial explorer and mistress of the moon, Hecate.
So this shifts the entire context. It's no longer a geopolitical crisis. It's a cosmic power play with an ancient earthbound threat and a powerful extraterrestrial ally.
And Hecate used her advanced science to make the elementals whole again, forming a new temporary alliance based on mutual benefit.
Their first order of business had to be revenge and retrieval.
Of course. The elementals and Hecate tracked the fugitives Zephyr, Old Dan, and the Asp to a remote Caribbean island that housed a space research facility. They correctly figured that was the last place the Asp would try to hide a valuable artifact.
And this is where Carol Danvers enters the story, linking this ancient conflict directly to a powerhouse of galactic defense.
Carol Danvers, who was Mrs. Marvel at the time, later Captain Marvel, sensed these unique, massive energy signatures coming from the island and traveled there, which led to the final confrontation.
And Danvers represents a level of power that none of the conventional defense teams on Earth, save for maybe the full Avengers roster, could match.
Right. And she operates without the geopolitical limitations that crippled the Avengers. So the Elementals, with their new ally Hecate, now faced a high-tier cosmic hero.
The battle begins. Hecate initially occupies Marvel, while Hydron, the Lord of Water, tries to dehydrate Zephyr, who was their prisoner, to force the Asp to reveal the Scarab's location.
The Asp complies, handing over the artifact to save her.
So the Elementals successfully possess the Scarab again, amplifying their powers, and this is the moment of final, absolute clarity about their nature.
Once their goal was achieved, their desire to rule the world was absolute. They instantly turned on Hecate.
That betrayal is so key, it proves their loyalty extends only to their own goal of godhood. No alliance, cosmic or otherwise, is safe from their ambition.
Which forces Hecate and Miss Marvel into this temporary, uneasy cooperation to prevent a new elemental tyranny.
And the takedown sequence here is just tactical and brilliant, using their own powers and internal conflicts against them.
It really is. First, Danvers focuses on Hellfire. She defeats him inside a vacuum chamber.
Just neutralizing his fire element in a confined, pressure-sealed space. That's a level of intelligence needed to defeat an elemental god.
Right. And with Hellfire neutralized, that internal strife flares up again. Magnum and Hydron, despite the immediate threat of 2 high-tier heroes, start fighting over who gets to hold the power-amplifying Scarab.
Which just shows that their hunger for individual power trumps any kind of tactical cooperation. Magnum wins that internal conflict, holding the Scarab.
So with only 2 elementals left, Danvers and Hecate cooperate to divide Magnum's attention. This opens the window for Danvers. Recognizing that the artifact itself was the source of their power, she just tears the Scarab directly from Magnum's hand.
And the resulting backlash of pure, unrestrained elemental energy incapacitates him.
The elementals' power is now destabilized, and without the focusing effect of the Scarab or their leader, they just collapsed. The Scarab itself was secured, ending the immediate threat.
And our sources say that the elemental's subsequent destiny is unrevealed. They could be defeated, exiled again, or just waiting for another cosmic player to find them.
They are nigh immortal after all. However, the Scarab's legacy continued. This is the crucial epilogue. The Ruby Scarab was eventually claimed by Mehmet Fowl, who became the heroic Scarlet Scarab.
Following in his father's footsteps, Abdul, the original 1940s Scarlet Scarab.
Which means the powerful dual-function artifact remains on Earth, no longer a beacon for ancient tyranny, but now in the hands of a protector.
The entire elemental saga, from the creation of the Scarab in 3500 BC through the Cairo Crisis and ending with Mrs. Marvel's intervention, is the perfect case study in the limits of institutional defense and the necessary chaos of improvisation.
Yeah, if we connect all this dense information back to the architecture of defense, what really stands out is how the definition of mightiest heroes just constantly shifts depending on the nature of the conflict.
Right.
Sometimes the necessary defense is an organized militaristic machine like Star Force. Sometimes it's an outlaw band driven by camaraderie like the Guardians of the Galaxy.
And sometimes it's a specialized group just protecting their own kind, like the X-Men.
Yeah.
And the Elemental Saga showed that even when Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, are mobilized, political constraints and bureaucratic paralysis can render them completely useless.
It forces the actual rescue effort onto these non-traditional, often accidental alliances involving doctors, students, reformed thieves, and exiled members.
The lesson for you, the listener, is that defense isn't just about raw firepower. It's about political authorization, it's about jurisdiction, and it's about the ability to improvise outside of those structures when they fail.
It's a powerful indictment of institutionalized heroism when the most disciplined forces are stopped by paperwork, and the world is saved by an Egyptologist who weaponized a dimensional rift.
The system is designed for these high-power, clear-cut threats, but it fails spectacularly when it faces a politically nuanced, strategically positioned threat. So what does this all mean for the big picture? Now that we've established the global intelligence, the cosmic armies, and the history of these elemental gods, we know the elementals sought godhood by controlling the four earthly elements: fire, water, earth, and air. They believed this primal control granted them dominion.
But we also know that the universe contains mutants. Homo superior, advanced synthetic intelligences like the Kree Supreme Intelligence, and cosmic beings that the Guardians face every week. Entities that manipulate time, space, and reality itself.
Which raises an important and, I think, provocative question for you to mull over.
If power over the four foundational elements defines godhood in the elemental-specific context, what hierarchy of power truly exists above simple elemental control? And what scale of threat truly defines a god in a universe that's protected by so many different layered levels of power?
Think about that cosmic hierarchy. We've established the architecture. Now you have the tools to analyze where the true power really lies. We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.